enthusiasts and relaxation seekers. My name is Cinephile ASMR, and today we are here to talk about one of 2025's first big movies with Wolfman. How is everybody doing? It has been a pretty decent hot minute, and we're most certainly going to talk about the minutiae and the intricacies behind that time, because there's been a lot. But for anybody that is new or returning that hasn't yet already been aware, I'm Cinephile ASMR, your go-to one-stop shop for all things movies and pop culture, tingles and relaxation. So consider subscribing for all things movies, reviews, as much up to date as I can. 2025 is going to be a big year, so subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and please follow me on my Letterboxd for the reviews that I post before the reviews that I record, and follow me on TikTok if it hopefully stays. Again, a lot of context and things to fill you all into, but that's going to be later. What is Wolfman about? You center on a husband, wife, and their daughter. Blake, the husband, and Charlotte, the wife, are having some intense marital strife. The distance couldn't be any more deafening. So Blake decides, as he gets the news that his father has passed, to go to his old childhood house in the woods. He does this to get away from the noise of the city, but most importantly, to focus on what matters most: family. But little do all of them know that there is a creature waiting there that may be more beast than man, that begins to scratch, then turn the husband Blake into something he has no control over. This comes to us hot off the press from the director Leigh Whannell. He got his start with a partnership with James Wan. They did Saw together, split off. James Wan, you probably have heard of. He did films like Insidious 1 and 2, The Conjuring 1 and 2, Aquaman, Furious 7. This guy, Malignant, he has done so much. But I'm gonna be so honest, I have not forgotten about Leigh Whannell probably since around 2019, when I saw his big debut, outside of him doing one of the Insidious films, but one that I could truly say was of his own beast. Upgrade is amazing, a very timely film that does not always overshadow its style with its intriguing and poignant message of AI, control, and the loss of humanity amongst the digital age. But for me, it was right before COVID, literally a month, if not less than that, where I saw The Invisible Man in theaters February of 2020, and I was obsessed. I saw it 3 times. It wound up being maybe top 3 of that year, even though the competition wasn't very big. I adored it. At every turn with both of his films, he has proven that it's as if he has concepts in mind that within any other hands would have just been made popcorn fodder, and you just put your face in popcorn, get that butter, that grease, the chocolate, or the candy you're eating, turn your brain off. But now, where I think The Invisible Man soared was in its attempt to discuss the real implications of a domestic violence relationship, coming above your own trauma, growing above it. It does falter. It has things in it that don't work well and kind of stick out because everything else is excellent, but its style and storytelling was there. So for about 5 years now, I've been wondering, what is this man going to cook? So naturally, when I found out he was going to be directing a Wolfman adaptation that originally, if you remember, was supposed to have Ryan Gosling, but then when I found out Christopher Abbott, a dude I've been championing for about the same time as Leigh Whannell, oh man, I was there. But it has been a little bit since this movie has come out. I saw it for about a week ago, and I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of good, quite a bit of bad, and a little bit in between. But let's start off, as always, with the good. Leigh Whannell continues his torch, his baton of trying Charlotte, the husband and wife. Wife works, the husband, stay-at-home dad. That is a side note that I actually really loved, that I do think emphasized in that latter half of the film when things start going so crazy, so bananas. I love that dynamic. You oftentimes don't see stay-at-home fathers be depicted in narrative fiction, but it exists. My own father has been a stay-at-home dad for as long as I can remember, and it's taught me a lot. So to have him be written in this way, to have that relationship with his daughter, whose actress I'm going to talk about, don't you worry, it really did make it to where when things got really brutal, gnarly, and not as character heavy, I felt it earned it, which then leads to the performances. You also have Julie Gardner, who's been an actress ever since I saw her in Ozark. I've been so anticipatory. I feel like I say that word sometimes, and it might not even be real. I anticipate everything she's going to be doing, and I will say, she is written in a very unique way, where she does feel a disconnect with her own child. She feels like her job is pulling her away from the familial ties, from being grounded with her family. And you're only given so much time before then she, along with everyone around her, including her husband, which is now, it's not even a spoiler, it's one of the big things in the trailer, is turning into a wolf, or realizing they're in a situation that has to require things within all of them they don't have. Strength, courage, wolf, that they've never experienced. And I think that, to me, is just such a unique posit where you find the most of someone's character in the physicality and what they are doing moment to moment, and I think she sells it. It took me a minute or two to really get down to the wavelength of it all, because she's written in a way where she is distracted by work, hesitant to go on this trip, begrudgingly does it, but it is really when he begins to turn full-fledged into the wolf that her character does take center stage and has to become this parent that she herself feels she can't. You realize that the relationship the daughter has with her father is nowhere near as close or intimate as it is with her mother. That's what I will give this movie. Its opening 10 minutes are fantastic. It carries a lot of that suspense and that eerie isolation that the Invisible Man has in a different capacity, exchanging a very abusive and toxic relationship where this woman feels like his presence, her ex-husband's presence, is looming over her shoulder in exchange for the vacancy and the isolation of living in the wilderness, being hunted. And I loved it. What Leigh Whannell does so well is a lot of times you will fully expect the jump scare to be placed somewhere, and if you try to play detective, you will be disappointed. And honestly, this movie is only like 100 minutes, maybe even dipping into the 90s without credits, and so it really doesn't waste too much time, but I will say it promises a unique host of creative liberties or swings, whether it then becomes above themselves when he starts to turn into the wolf. The trailer did kind of show it, but it manipulates in different ways this idea of perception, where his more animalistic traits start to take center stage, hearing the pitter-patter of a creature upstairs, or his vision becoming obscured, not being able to understand what the people around him are saying. I loved it. It gets a little freaky, a little odd. It just doesn't really do enough with it. But either way, if it is the really good, which are the glimpses of an end to a family that is at this stage at a rut of dysfunction, they are there, or even in the stuff that doesn't fully work, Christopher Abbott solidifies himself as an actor that, like, when you've seen someone in a film before, you're like, I know that guy, or he has a familiar face, but he is never enough given a center role. So to have him be the star in this is pretty wonderful. Julie Gardner's great, but Matilda Firth, who plays the young daughter, sells it all. I'm going to get into a bit of a flaw I had with her writing, which is actually really rare, when I say that the actress, a young child actor or performance, is so good that the writing doesn't really match it. I kind of say the opposite. Child performances are hard. But dipping more into when the film becomes a full-fledged horror film, I am kind of confused at this complaint that people say where you don't get the atypical full moon, full wolf transformation. In my opinion, you get it in a way akin to what Leigh Whannell stated, which is when this man gets infected, you do not see him transform into a wolf, but you see a man lose his humanity to this disease. And I really do think that was where it really held its most fascinating to me. Because this is a man being turned into a beastly creature, but not a werewolf, but this obstructed man hybrid that I thought that the design of it was fantastic. There are some things that this film plays with that I think conceptually are great. As I alluded to earlier, it's kind of playing around in this sandbox of perception. The farther down the rabbit hole Blake goes as this creature, the harder it is for him to see the world that the world around him is. It messes with color, with faces, and I loved it. We just didn't really get enough of it. And there is concepts that are played here, especially, I'm not going to get into spoilers here, but this idea of when he fully becomes this wolf and the thing that infects him, tying back to this theme that really does play itself for the most part in the better of not wanting to be amounted to the trauma that was inflicted onto you, that you then in turn can inflict onto others. I thought it worked. Generational trauma, familial trauma, and I thought that part really did work. And there's a part that this movie plays on that its idea is chilling, is very chilling. And all I will say, and if you've seen it, you may know what I mean, is it's towards the latter, 20-30 minutes of the film, and what he as this creature is trying to do, and what the people around him see, vastly different. And it was an idea that just sent chills down my spine, and it lends itself to one of the last shots in the movie actually making me tear up. And I think it doesn't abandon its thesis, more as I think Leigh Whannell, whereas the difference with The Invisible Man is it takes it from the angle of domestic violence, and you start with this relationship between a husband and wife, whereas the Wolfman is a lot more animalistic. But I do think at the end of the day, you are in the boxing ring of boxing against yourself constructed of a wolf. It's going to be this animalistic thing, and thus you get moments that it tries to lean into the brutality, into the blood, into the gore, but then you also try to keep the essence of that familial energy, and I don't think it always reaps the benefit that it could have. And it's interesting too, because in a similar issue that I had with The Invisible Man, where the middle section of the film gets caught up in a trope that I absolutely hate with horror, which is that you have spent the first hour of the film watching someone go through things that are legitimate to them, but you spend a part of the film, typically that second act, where everyone around them doesn't seem to believe them at all. You know it's real, and it's just this hurdle the movie has to go through to get back to its goodness. Here, similarly, it's in that portion where he hasn't fully turned yet, but he isn't fully human yet, so he's in this middle ground. And when he's by himself and it goes through the motions of his hearing being heightened, or just his sense of smell being just intensified, it only gets to be so much before you're like, okay, let's get on with it. And again, it works when he's around his family, and I just don't think it fully goes to the level that I think it should. People don't think it's as bloody as it should. That's a discussion for later. I don't really agree, but I will say I do think, conceptually speaking, and on a tonal and structural level, the film can go places. A lot of times it does, but it feels like it often sidesteps or only dips its toes into the ideas and the moments that it has. Another huge credit I do have to give this film, though, is the trailer. You think does allude to the overall story, and while I do think one of its pros is that Wolfman is a very simple story. You really do save the best for watching the movie, and none of it in the trailers. And I gotta give the movie, and again, another big round of props. For about 80% of it, you take place in this house, the farm, just this surrounding area of this house and the land it lays on, and just on the perspective of being an aspiring filmmaker, understanding structure and budget, and seeing that all of this basically exists in a very small confined area while it keeps reinventing itself for the most part. I love it, but also as a fan of tight, bottled, claustrophobic thrillers and horror films, it scratched that itch in spades. And unfortunately, it does amount to an ending that I don't want to say is underwhelming, but a bit yet again, a missed opportunity. I was talking about the child performance, Matilda Firth. She is so good, and you really do feel for not only her, but her father, Christopher Abbott, and just the whole family when she is seeing her dad changing through this sickness, and the allegory of it being like a disease, and him not wanting to become what his surroundings were as a kid, imprinting onto this moment is really great. But the ending and the way that the last 20 minutes wrap up plays itself like her character then becomes a character in service of the plot rather than fully committing and doing the writing that set her up justice. Now I know that can sound really confusing, but like without kind of stating the obvious or skirting around that, she develops this really strong bond with her father. It's set up that he is a stay-at-home dad. That works. When she's beginning to see her father turn, she then has to confide in her mother for safety. That works. But by the end, just the way that the story kind of concludes, I found that she was more so used as a pawn to serve the story and how it would wrap up versus what I think they set her up for, which was having a much more visceral reaction. I hate playing director and trying to put myself in the perspective of the director's film that I am watching and seeing what I could have done different, because I think that's just a privilege to take. It's like I am just plugging myself in a part of a movie that works because of another director's vision, and I say I would have done this part differently, although I don't know what it took to get there. Like, this movie is really well constructed. I will say it's a bit too dark at points. It isn't as fine-tuned as The Invisible Man, technically, but like the prosthetics, the makeup, the blood, the gore, the acting, cinematography, the score is a little funky as well. It pretty much moves on pretty much all cylinders, but I gotta admit, I wish I could have gotten more from the ending. On paper, it works, but I wish it went just a little bit more evil. And I think at the end of the day, I get why this movie is lauded as like a big misfire for some. It's called Wolfman. You get far more the man than the wolf, but as someone who that's the reason why I loved The Invisible Man, was because you got so much deeper of a character dissection than The Invisible Man. That's what I wanted from this film, and for the most part, I think you get it, but I do think after a while, and having sat on the film, you can't help but think a lot of it kind of boils down to missed opportunity or not capitalizing on basically the ground that was laid out for you. I do think the film spends and occupies its time in that middle act in places a bit more than it shouldn't, and it leads to an ending that I think fits in ways but doesn't fully commit to where I think it could have fit in those ways even better. And I get that like the relationships for the most part work. I just wish we got a little more, just a little more. I've heard people say that like I wish they got like more from certain character dynamics, and I don't disagree. When it comes to the father completely turning into this beast, I think there was really great opportunity to do something with Charlotte and her daughter, but you don't really get that. And I get the idea of like you don't really have downtime. I respect that, but there is in the film, and I just wish it could have been polluted with a bit more zest to the meal of character development to help it flow a little better. But still, all I will say, without being too obvious, is I think for the most part it works. Its thesis does tie itself back in at the very end. The final moment, I think, is very melancholic. Very, very melancholic. Rewards mostly, not fully. And there's moments in between that don't always land. I wish it did go commit harder to the perception and the way that his ideas and mindset warps becoming the beast. But I really don't think this movie is nearly as bad as people say it is. I just think it's very different than what you would think. And it's funny because, like, I tried telling myself, because this movie isn't doing too well financially, it's because people don't want to see a wolf. But, like, if you put, like, the Invisible Man and Wolfman side by side, I would say, yeah, there's no way in hell the modern audience is going to watch an Invisible Man movie. I think it just comes down to, like, overall reception does matter. And I don't think this movie always lands. Christopher Abbott, Julie Gardner, Matilda Firth are so great in this bottled, self-contained film. Its ideas do play relevancy as the film progresses. It doesn't abandon the sauce. It just isn't as committed or steeped in the stew as I wish it did prior, like he did with The Invisible Man. So with all that being said, I'm gonna give Wolfman a B. Like I said, I really did enjoy myself with the film. There's parts that I'll take on its own. The man even threw in a Saw reference, like, what? And I dig it. I really dig it. It's just, I wish it went a little more. And it didn't feel like the fullest meal, or my appetite wasn't as quenched as I wish it was. And it couldn't have gone deeper. It could have gone harder. But it's okay. You know, I think for a January release, this January's actually been pretty damn good. I've been seeing like 3 to 4 movies already, and none of them are bad. This would probably be at like the lower end. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. As I mentioned earlier, it has been a pretty rowdy and intense past like 2 months. I'll say I did start a new job, and I've been kind of tuning to it. I'm going to be starting school back up in 2025. Just it's been a lot of proverbial noise, and I put like so much effort into TikTok because, like, for convenience sake, small form, short form content has been rewarding me really well. And then when TikTok went away, they took away CapCut, which is the app that I use to edit, you know. I have like intense ADHD, so like it's difficult for me to just sit and edit, so it's so convenient to port it onto my phone and start editing away. So for a bit there, I was like, what the hell am I gonna do? Although it was a short-lived moment, my point is, it really showed me the value of having these applications at my disposal, and it showed me the gratitude and how just insatiably hungry I am to make more videos. So I really am gonna put forth as much effort as I can to watching the newest films, reviewing them for you. Screw the numbers. If I love a movie, I'm gonna try and put you on. I've already had 2 big videos planned coming soon. I did a series earlier where I showed my movie collection. That was a disaster. I'm proud of the work, but at what cost? Sleepless nights. I shifted my whole room around. I yapped for like I want to say 10 hours. Then I had to reduce that to about like 6 for you to watch. But I got a new one coming up, and soon enough, within the next couple of weeks, we're cooking up the best of 2024 list. It's big. It's big. I'm proud of it. I'm sorting it all together. I have like 1 or 2 more movies to watch before I can put my stamp of approval on it. But get excited, guys. This is 2025. 2024 fucking sucked. Excuse my French. Fucking sucked. Mad disappointing. Curveballs left, right, and center. Things that I thought I could really sink my teeth into. Get what I did there with Wolfman, sorry. It didn't pan out. People disappoint. It's okay though. You guys never disappoint. Thank you for thugging it out with me up until now. I'm so glad to be back. It always feels good, you know. The studio, the corner of my room that I film TikToks in as well. But like filming this like it's landscape, baby, instead of portrait, and really just just getting everything set up, my research, my notes. It feels so much more formal and rewarding. So I can't wait to put us on for all the rest of 2025. So thank you so much for staying this long. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what movie you're looking forward to coming out this year. And I promise you, we're going to be tapping in harder than ever this year. So I love you all so very, very, very much. And I will see you in the next one. But remember to take life one frame at a time. I'll see you soon, guys.